In an ancient diary, macabre secrets were unveiled. Marcos, an investigative journalist, embarks on a thrilling journey to unravel the mysteries of Alfredo, a sinister surgeon. As the investigation deepens, Marcos finds himself caught in a dangerous game between light and darkness. Get ready for a tale of horror, courage, and redemption. It was a cold and rainy night, the type where silence was broken only by thunderclaps and the winds whistle through windows. In a forgotten small town deep in the heart of Mexico, a shadow crept along the empty streets. In the depths of this town, where streetlights mysteriously flickered out, a dark secret was about to be uncovered. Our protagonist, Marcos, an investigative journalist with a keen nose for macabre stories, had received an anonymous tip. They said that in the 1960s, a surgeon with a disturbing smile and a diseased mind had committed crimes so heinous that even the devil himself would be ashamed. His name was Alfredo. Marcos was a man of courage, but as he read reports of mutilated bodies and strange symbols drawn in blood, something inside him whispered that this story was different. His journalistic instinct pushed him forward, but a chilling sensation crawled up his spine, as if a pair of invisible eyes watched him in the darkness. Alfredo Baltrivio had once been a respected surgeon, a man of science and precision. But something had changed in him. Something horrifying had infiltrated his soul. In the silence of the night, he committed his hideous acts, always in the shadows, always in mystery. The small, curious town whispered about him, but no one dared speak aloud, for mentioning his name could lead to disappearing without a trace. The rain pounded heavily as Marcos arrived at the old house where Alfredo performed his atrocities. It was a decrepit building, with broken windows and a door that creaked like a lament of lost souls. Every step he took inside echoed endlessly, heightening his unease. Deep down, Marcos knew he was about to unearth an ancient evil, a malevolence that should not be disturbed. But curiosity, the weapon of his profession, pushed him forward even as his heart raced frantically in his chest. Entering a dark room, he found ancient surgical instruments meticulously arranged, sinisterly gleaming in the dim light of his flashlight. In the corner, a dusty diary told tales that would chill anyone to the bone. And it was there, in that cursed house, amid sickening accounts and macabre tools, that Marcos realized he was only scratching the surface of absolute evil. The true terror of Alfredo Baltrivio was about to be revealed. And what he found in the depths of that darkness would forever change his own soul. Marcos, with the flashlight in hand, began flipping through the old diary he had found. The cover, worn and dirty leather, bore illegible inscriptions and stains that resembled dried blood. The pages, yellowed and fragile, contained the words of a man who had once been seen as a savior, but had slowly revealed himself to be a true monster. In the initial entries, Alfredo described his surgeries with the coldness of a professional. But as the days progressed, his accounts grew darker. He wrote about a calling, something he felt deep into the night, a voice whispering ancient secrets, promising knowledge and power in exchange for sacrifices. Marcos, with a lump in his throat, read about the first victims. Drunk on the macabre voice, Alfredo had begun selecting specific patients, those who wouldn't be missed, those who could disappear without raising suspicion. He detailed his acts with disturbing precision, the accuracy of his incisions, the sensation of flesh yielding under his blades. He sought the essence of life in his diabolical experiments. In a later volume, Marcos found a grotesque illustration drawn by Alfredo himself. It depicted a strange symbol, a spiral intertwined with humanoid figures that seemed to twist and scream in silence. Beside the drawing was a note, the door to true understanding. Amidst this chaos, Marcos realized something horrifying. Some of the more recent descriptions aligned with current disappearances cases he himself had investigated. Despite Alfredo having been dead for years, The evil he had invoked seemed still present and active in the town. Feeling the air grow heavy and his breath increasingly labored, Marcos heard a distant whisper, a sound that cut through the silence like a sharp blade. Turning abruptly, he saw nothing but dense darkness. But deep in his soul, he knew Alfredo was not alone. Something remained lurking, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to dare delve into the depths of his bloody legacy. The lines between past and present began to blur for Marcos, revealing a timeless terror, a cycle of evil demanding constant sacrifices. He understood that unearthing this history could awaken horrors that should remain buried. But it was already too late. The diary, the whispers, and the eerie sensation of being watched had marked him. As he left the house, the rain seemed to cease, giving way to an even deeper and more oppressive silence. He felt that, upon turning the next page of his investigation, he would come face to face with the true face of evil. And this was a journey from which few returned sane, if they returned at all. Marcos emerged from the cursed house with the diary clutched firmly in his trembling hands. The rain had finally ceased, leaving an unsettling silence in his path back to the hotel. Throughout that night, seated at a creaking, weathered wooden table, he continued to pore over the pages stained with the surgeon's diseased words. The entries in the diary delved deeper into obscure rituals and mystical symbols. Alfredo had become obsessed with what he called the Grand Access, believing that human sacrifices were the key to opening a portal to another world, where forbidden knowledge awaited. As Marcos read, a specific phrase leaped from the pages, etching itself into his mind. On the night of the crescent moon, the blood of the innocent must be spilled to align the stars with the soul. As the understanding of the malevolent ritual unfolded, Marcos recalled an old reference to a specific night, which coincided exactly with that very night. The clock struck midnight, and urgency filled Marcos. He knew he couldn't ignore the newfound knowledge or the connections the story drew to recent events in the town. He needed to act swiftly before another innocent life was sacrificed to complete the dreadful ritual. Following clues from the diary, he arrived at an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town, a secluded place shrouded in creep. Approaching the altar, Marco saw symbols drawn in fresh blood on the floor, a harbinger of what was about to unfold. He felt the presence of evil around him, like an oppressive shadow threatening to engulf him. Suddenly, a scream pierced the silence, echoing from the dark depths of the chapel. Driven by both fear and the need to prevent another sacrifice, Marcos dashed towards the sound. In the back, in a dimly lit room, he found a young woman bound to an improvised altar. Her eyes reflected pure terror. Before he could act, a fleeting figure materialized from the shadows, not Alfredo, but something radiating the same malevolence. The entity, a living reflection of the evil invoked by the surgeon, seemed intent on completing the interrupted ritual. Marcos knew he had to act quickly, so he seized a rusted surgical instrument he had found and advanced. A desperate, frantic struggle ensued as Marcos fought against both the entity and his own paralyzing fear. At a critical moment, he plunged the instrument into the central symbol of the ritual, causing the entity to recoil with a haunting scream that reverberated throughout the chapel. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The shadows dissipated, and the figure vanished as if it had never existed. Marcos, heart pounding furiously, freed the young woman and helped her to her feet. Together, they exited the chapel, finally free, at least physically, from the temporarily suppressed evil. Yet Marcos knew the true terror still lurked. The diary remained with him, full of secrets that, if exposed, could either destroy or save more lives. In the silence of that dissipating night, he understood that his journey was far from over. More macabre tales and chilling secrets of Alfredo awaited discovery. And Marcos, with his fear and courage intertwined, was determined to confront the darkness, to shed light on the truth, even if it cost him his sanity. Marcos left the young woman safely in the care of a local hospital, under a false name to ensure her protection. With the weight of the diary still in his trembling hands, he knew he had to decipher every page, every symbol, to fully understand the extent of the horrors Alfredo had unleashed. His mind spun with questions. What else could be written in that macabre diary? Were there other rituals and secrets he had yet to uncover? Back in his hotel room, an oppressive sense of urgency consumed him. Seated at the table, he continued to flip through the pages, his eyes scanning the cramped text and manic illustrations. Then, he stumbled upon an entry that left him paralyzed. Alfredo had mentioned an exclusive compendium of souls, a collection of records detailing each sacrifice with ruthless precision. The names, dates, and circumstances of the deaths were chillingly accurate. Marcos recognized some of the names' local disappearances he had investigated but never connected to Alfredo. There was a macabre pattern. Each sacrifice coincided not only with Alfredo's rituals, but also with specific astronomical events. A note in the diary mentioned a special place, a nearby cave described as the Nebulary, where Alfredo conducted more elaborate and complex sacrifices. With forced calm and an unwavering desire to put an end to this madness, Marcos knew he had to go there. Entering the cave, he was greeted by a deafening silence, broken only by a faint draft that produced a constant mournful sensation. Walls adorned with ancient runes and perplexing symbols seemed to observe his intrusion. Deep within the cave, he discovered an altar of black stone, still stained with encrusted blood and aged bones. As he examined the altar, the temperature in the cave plummeted drastically, and a profound sense of dread settled in. A muffled murmur filled the air, as if the dead themselves whispered unspeakable secrets. Marcos knew he was not alone. Suddenly, one of the figures mentioned in the diary, a nurse who had assisted Alfredo and was never found, appeared. Her face twisted in an expression of eternal pain, eyes devoid of life, yet gleaming with intense malevolence. She moved toward Marcos, darkness trailing her every step, malignant energy emanating. With adrenaline pumping, Marcos recalled some protective symbols mentioned in the diary. Hastily, he drew a circle on the ground with the figures, imbuing each stroke with all his strength of will. As he completed the last stroke, the nurse froze, a silent scream echoing through the cavern's solid space. The figures slowly dissipated, the air returning to normal temperature. The circle of protection had worked for now. But Marcos knew Alfredo had left much more than victims and incomplete rituals. He had left a legacy of darkness that would need to be dismantled piece by piece. As he exited the cave, Marcus's eyes were determined. He carried with him not just the diary, but also the responsibility to stop this evil from continuing. He knew he would need to unearth more buried secrets, perhaps in even more dangerous locations, but the fate of the souls involved depended on his courage and persistence. Increasingly aware of the burden he carried, Marcos was determined to unravel the web of terror woven by Alfredo, even if it meant sacrificing his own sanity and safety in the process. He was ready for the next stage in the fight against the surgeon's dark legacy. Marcos plunged into a frenzy of research, documenting every dark detail he found in Alfredo's diary. As the pages unfolded, he came across mentions of other sinister locations scattered throughout the region. The names of the missing continued to surface, leading him on a grim cat and mouse game with the surgeon's macabre legacy. During his investigations, Marcos discovered an abandoned orphanage that served as a front for Alfredo's rituals. The place lay hidden beneath a dense forest, secluded from civilization, a prison for the innocent souls who had been delivered to their cruel fate. Guided by the evidence left by the surgeon, Marcos cautiously entered through the orphanage's rusted gates, confronting the darkness and whispering murmurs that filled the air. Each step felt heavy, resonating his determination to unravel the final secrets and put an end to Alfredo's trail of destruction. In one of the abandoned rooms, Marcos found a peculiar object, a elaborately decorated wooden box covered in ancient symbols. Inside, he discovered worn photographs, notes, and newspaper clippings, all related to the rituals and disappearances. One photograph in particular caught his attention, a young girl who appeared to have been Alfredo's last victim. Her gaze conveyed terror and lost innocence. It was as if she whispered to Marcos, pleading for justice for those who hadn't escaped Alfredo's cruel hands. Digging deeper into the box, Marcos uncovered a letter written by the surgeon himself. Its contents revealed his final plan, involving a dark ceremony to be held at a remote location, known only to a few initiates. There, the final secrets would be revealed, and ultimate power would be attained. Guided by his discoveries, Marcos set out in search of this last unknown and dangerous location. Each step brought him closer to the final confrontation, but also heightened the darkness threatening to consume his mind and soul. Deep-seated fears and doubts plagued him, but he knew facing Alfredo's legacy was his inevitable destiny. Finally, he arrived at the prophesied location, an ancient sanatorium secluded atop a hill. The shadowy ruins seemed to echo past horrors as Marcos ventured inside, facing the looming terror of what awaited. Within the desolate building, Marcos found a room filled with profane symbols and flickering candles. At its center, Alfredo stood draped in a black robe, his gaze wild and his mind lost in the depths of the evil he had created. The final confrontation began. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as Marcos fought to stand firm against the dark powers surrounding Alfredo. Every strike, every move was a battle for survival and the redemption of innocent victims. With his unwavering determination and unshakable courage, Marcos pushed beyond the boundaries of reality and defeated Alfredo, ending the era of terror he had unleashed. Tranquility finally returned to the ancient sanatorium, the torment silenced. As he walked away from the ruins, a mix of relief and sadness washed over Marcos. He had paid a high price for his quest for truth and justice, but the feeling of having liberated the tormented souls left a deep mark on his soul. Marcos knew his journey was not yet complete. Alfredo's legacy had been destroyed, but the scars left by his actions would continue to resonate with the victims and their families. He was determined to bring to light the hidden horrors, honoring the lives lost and ensuring that the memory of those who suffered at Alfredo's hands would never fade. And so, the story of Marcos, the fearless journalist, and his confrontation with the sinister surgeon came to an end. But darkness and secrets will always lurk in the shadows, reminding us of the ongoing need to confront our deepest terrors and fight for justice, no matter the circumstances. But even after Alfredo's apparent defeat, Marcos couldn't find peace. His dreams were still haunted by visions of the rituals, the victims, and the symbols he had seen. There was something unfinished, a presence that still lingered. Determined to delve deeper into the diary, searching for any clues he might have overlooked, Marcos found a barely noticeable glued page. Carefully, he peeled the side page, revealing a detailed map with pencil marks indicating a series of specific locations. A handwritten note in red read, "The Final Haunting." Marcos shuddered. It was clear that Alfredo had left a remnant of his power somewhere, something that needed to be eradicated for the cycle to be completely broken. Back on the road, Marcos followed the map to an old abandoned mine in the hills. The entrance was partially collapsed, but still accessible. The air was thick with the acrid smell of earth and dampness, enveloping him in a sense of oppression. Inside the mine, a labyrinth of tunnels unfolded, each feeling more claustrophobic than the last. The stone walls seemed to close in with every step. Following the path indicated on the map, Marcos arrived at a large chamber illuminated by a supernatural light emanating from crystals embedded in the walls. In the center of the chamber, he found an altar similar to what he had seen before, but this one was adorned with even more unsettling relics, grotesque sculptures, and human skulls placed in ritualistic arrangement. As he approached the altar, he felt a force pulling him, as if the mine itself was alive, breathing with restrained malice. It was then that he saw the spectral figure of Alfredo, more powerful and threatening than ever. It wasn't just a ghost, but a manifestation of all the evil he had cultivated in life. His presence filled the chamber with a dark luminosity, a paradox of light and despair. Marcos knew he couldn't face such a force with mere physical strength. Remembering the protective symbols and clues from the diary, he began to recite words he had memorized, hastily drawing the symbols on the ground with a mixture of chalk and dried blood he had prepared. Each line traced and word spoken weakened Alfredo's figure, which roared with elemental force, fighting with every drop of remaining energy. The battle between good and evil inside that ancient chamber seemed eternal, each second an eternity. Marcos felt his body and mind being pulled into darkness when, finally, with one last desperate effort, he completed the banishment ritual. Alfredo's figure contorted, screamed, and finally shattered like glass, spreading shards of shadow that quickly dissipated into the cold air of the chamber. The mine seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the air becoming cleaner, lighter. Exhausted, Marcos fell to his knees, but with a deep sense of relief and accomplishment. He had destroyed the last vestige of Alfredo's evil, finally releasing all the souls trapped by the surgeon's malignant ambition. The walls of the mine, which had heard so many atrocities over the years, now heard the voice of redemption. As he emerged from the mine, dawn was breaking on the horizon, the first rays of sun announcing the end of a long and tortuous night. Marcos felt that, although the world was still full of shadows, he had brought a glimpse of light. He knew his work as a journalist and as a guardian of truth was far from over. But for now, he could savor the hard-earned serenity. As Marcos contemplated the artifact enclosed in his discovery, he heard a sharp sound of breaking glass from outside his office. His instincts as an investigative journalist kicked in. Carefully taking the artifact, he stored it in a secret compartment in his desk before quickly heading towards the source of the noise. Upon opening the door, he saw 3 hooded figures rummaging through his office in a frantic search. It was clear they knew about the artifact and wanted to retrieve it. Marcos realized that Alfredo's cult was more determined than ever to continue their sinister mentor's legacy. Without hesitation, Marcos grabbed a heavy bronze candlestick and confronted the intruders. The battle was swift and intense. Despite being outnumbered, the hooded figures were well trained, but Marcos used every ounce of his survival instinct and determination. 2 of the invaders were knocked out, but the third managed to escape through the broken window, visibly disappointed for not finding the artifact. Aware of the imminent threat, Marcos knew he had to act quickly. He retrieved the artifact from the drawer and decided that the best option would be to destroy it once and for all. He contacted a friend, an archaeologist specialized in supernatural artifacts, who knew how to handle objects of malevolent power. Meeting at a remote and secure location, the archaeologist revealed that the only way to destroy the artifact would be to perform a purgatory ritual at a blessed sanctuary hidden deep within an isolated mountain. The journey would be arduous but necessary. During the hike to the sanctuary, Marcos and the archaeologist faced natural challenges and other ambushes from cultists who seemed to emerge from every shadow. The cult's determination to retrieve the artifact and resurrect Alfredo was terrifying. In the sanctuary cave, amidst stalactites and the flow of crystal-clear waters, Marcos and the archaeologist prepared for the ritual. Candles and sacred symbols were set up. Marcos held the artifact while the archaeologist began chanting in an ancient language. As the ritual progressed, the air around the artifact began to vibrate with intense energy. The artifact trembled violently and emitted a dark glow. Suddenly, the sacred altar seemed to react, absorbing the artifact's malevolent energy. A fierce wind began to swirl around them, growing in intensity. The archaeologist's chants grew louder, almost drowned out by the fury of the wind. Finally, with a primal shout, the archaeologist broke the binding spell, and the artifact shattered in an explosion of light and sound, throwing Marcos and his archaeologist friend backward. When they finally regained their senses, the air was calm, and the artifact had been reduced to ashes. The sanctuary fell silent, enveloped in a comforting peace. All the evil that Alfredo had infused into the artifact was dissipated. Marcos deeply thanked the archaeologist and returned to the city, feeling immense relief. He knew that while part of the evil had been contained, Alfredo's followers still existed, but without the artifact, their power was severely weakened. Back in his office, finally safe, Marcos began writing a series of articles exposing Alfredo's entire history and his cult, warning the public and authorities about the lingering threat. He knew the battle against evil was ongoing, but felt more prepared and determined than ever. And so, Marcos continued his crusade, vigilant and tireless, protected by his knowledge and the certainty that good could prevail. Follow every chapter of this gripping narrative and subscribe to our channel to not miss any detail of this compelling story. Click the subscribe button and let's embark on this journey together.